Hello and welcome to this tutorial on how to make a game of Connect 4 using Excel and VBA. The reason I've decided to do a tutorial on this is because the amount of code used is very small. So you can see here, in fact, this is all the code used to build this game. Instead, I have made use of a lot of the built-in functionality of Excel, which people may be more familiar with to make the game work. So here's the game itself. I'll start a new game. The way it works is players take it in turns to choose their columns, and of course when one of them gets 4 in a row it declares a winner. As always, you can get a copy of this spreadsheet if you don't want to make it from scratch by dropping me an email. I'll put my email in the description below. So let's open a new spreadsheet to build the game in from scratch, and what I'm going to do is keep the other one open just so we can compare. So the first thing we'll want to do is create the board itself. A Connect 4 board is 6 tall and 7 wide. So I'm going to select a 6 by 7 range, and I'm going to name that range by clicking up here in the top left, board, and pressing enter. So now at any time when I select board, it gives me that range. To create this classic Connect 4 aesthetic, I'm going to use conditional formatting. So let's go and add a new rule. I'm going to base it on the values of the cells, and I'm going to use an icon set. Specifically this one here, which is called 3 traffic lights. So I'm going to base this on the value of the cells. So I need to change this to number because we're going to use the numbers 0, 1 and 2. I'm going to change those values. So what I've done here is I've said this first icon will be shown when the number is less than 1, or in this case we're going to use 0, and I want that to be an empty cell, and so I'm going to make it a white circle. When it's greater than or equal to 1 but less than 2, it will be yellow. So basically when the cell has a 1 in it, it will be yellow. And then when it's greater than or equal to 2, or in this case we're only going to be using 2, I want it to be red. Okay, so let me show you how that looks. There's a 0, there's a 1, and there's a 2. But of course we don't want the numbers showing. So let's just go back to manage that rule, and let's tick show icon only. And that way, when we apply that, we will only see the circles themselves. Okay. Next, I guess we want it to have the nice blue background. So let me just select the whole board again, and I'll simply fill it with this blue. If I increase the font, then we can get it looking a bit nicer. And of course we want the cells to really hug the spaces, so there's not too much gap in between. And if I center the font, the text, then the circles will be in the center of those cells. So that's the formatting you need, and of course a board would have all empty spaces to begin with. So I've just put them all to 0, which is representing empty. And there we go, we have our board. Now I'm going to start naming some ranges, and the exact reason why will become clearer later, but basically I'm going to have different named ranges to be able to refer to them in formulas and in VBA code later on. So first off, I'm going to name each column col 1, and finally column 7. So I now have 7 named ranges, 1 for each column. The next ranges I'm going to name are going to allow us to check for wins. So I'm going to start off by selecting all of the possible horizontal wins. So basically I'm going to name them horizontal 1, 2, 3 and so on. But basically any 4 horizontal cells in a row is a potential win, and so I will name all of them. This is horizontal 23, and finally the last one is horizontal 24. So there are 24 possible horizontal wins in a game of Connect 4. I'm going to do exactly the same for the vertical ones. I'm going to call these vert 1, vert 2, vert 3, and so on. Here are the last few vertical ranges we need to check for wins. So there are 21 possible wins vertically in a game of Connect 4. Next I'm going to do the diagonals. However, I'm not just going to select them like this, and the reason for this is because of how I'm going to check the wins later. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to select the whole square. So this would be used to check if there is a diagonal win from top left to bottom right, or from bottom left to top right. And I'm going to call these diag 1 and so on. Diag 11 and diag 12. So there are 12 grids, which mean there are 24 possible diagonal wins available. Okay, next I'll add the row here. These are essentially the buttons that allow the players to select the column they want to play in. But let me demonstrate what happens when a column becomes full. So the arrow is replaced with a cross. The way I am going to do this is to use a formula to ask if this space at the top of the column below is empty or not. And if you remember from before, 0 represents empty. So we're basically checking if there's a 0 there or not. So you can do this by doing an if statement. If b4 equals 0, then we'll use an arrow, otherwise we use an X. And you can imagine if it did get filled up, it changes. But I'm actually going to use the named ranges from before. So I'm going to say if index col 1, 1, and that's basically saying the first item in the range column 1, so this cell here, equals 0, then we'll do the downward arrow and the X. If not, and that seems a bit more complicated, and it is, but the reason I've done this is because we've got the named ranges. It means if we do change the size of our board or move things around a lot, it's just keeping things nice and neat and consistent. And then I can just do exactly the same for all the other columns, but replacing, oops, if I copy the actual formula, but replacing the column name itself. It's column 2, column 3, 7. So now we have a formula to tell us whether they can or can't play in each column based on whether that top space is empty or not. And I'm just going to change the formatting of these cells to make it a bit neater, put it into the center, make them larger and bold so that they're clearly buttons. I think we're ready to actually do some VBA code now. What we'll do first is code in the player's ability to click on here and drop a piece into the column. So we need to open up Visual Basic, and we do that by pressing Alt F11. Okay, what we need is an event trigger, and by that I mean we want the code to run upon the user clicking one of these spaces. So the event is the user clicking that space. So where we do this, it needs to be within the object, the sheet itself. So all of the events that happen in sheet 1 belong in here. We can then select from the drop-downs worksheet, and the first one it's chosen is selection change, and that's what we want. So it's looking for when they have selected a new cell, and then this code will be triggered. The first thing I want to do is make sure the user has only selected one cell before I run my code. So that means if they select multiples like that, we don't run any code, it's only if they select one. So we'll do that by using this range here called target. So this is the range that the user has selected, and we're going to say if target.count equals 1, then. And this if statement just means that the code in here will only run if they've selected one and only one cell. The next thing I want to check is if they've selected one of the cells within this range. So I'm going to name this range col choose, and that way I can refer to it really easily within VBA. So I can say if intersect target, the cell's been selected, and then range col choose. So that's how you can reference a named range within VBA. Is nothing, then. And sorry, I should put a not at the beginning here. So just to explain what this line of code is doing, this bit is saying, give me the intersection between the selected range and our range called col choose. And then we're checking if that range is nothing or not. So if there is no overlap between what the user has selected and our named range, then it will return nothing. If there is overlap, i.e. they've clicked something in that range, then it won't return nothing. So this statement will be false, and that's why we have to say not. So we are looking for a situation where this is not true, and then if that's the case, we know they have selected a cell within our range col choose. And that means we need to trigger a piece placement. So for now, I'm just going to put a message box in to show you how that works. So if I click anywhere on the sheet, nothing happens unless I click one cell within that range and it says place piece. If I click more than one, nothing happens because of this if statement. Now, what we really want to do is, instead of say place a piece, we want to actually place a piece. So I'm going to create another sub here. I'm going to call it place piece, and I'm going to set it so that it has to take a variable called target, and this is going to be a range. So in this sub, I want it to place a piece in the next available space in that column, and we will call the sub from here and feed the target in. So target is still going to be the cell that the user has selected. So we need to figure out which column they have selected. I'm going to do that by setting the variable c, so that's a new variable, to this. And I will explain what this is doing once I finish typing. Okay. Oh, something's gone wrong there. One too many brackets. There we go. So this is basically creating a new range, and the range is from the first item in col choose. So this one here is saying give us the first cell in col choose, which is this one, and the range starts there and it ends at target. So if the user selects this one, it will give us this range. If they select the first one, it will just give us the first cell. But basically it's going to give us the range up from the first column up to the column that the user selected. And so this bit here, .columns.count, is literally counting how many columns are in that range. So all it's doing is saying, this is column X. I'll demonstrate that with a message box. So I'll put a message box here and I'll output C. When I click on a column, it tells us which number column we've selected. There we have column 5. But instead of simply telling us which column we've picked, we want it to check what is the next available space and put a piece in there. Let's remove that message box. What we will do is, when a column is selected, we'll use the name range below, so in this case col 5, to say, is the 6th item or the 6th row empty? If yes, place a piece. If not, is the row above it empty? And so on. So let's start off with row 6. I will create a variable r equals 6. And then I'm going to use a while loop to go through each of these rows until I find an empty space. I'm going to use our named range to do this alongside C. So C is the column that's been selected, and so if we select column 5, this will be col_5, which is our named range. And we want to look at the item or row R, starting with the 6th row. And we're checking if it's empty. So we want to say it does not, actually we're checking if it's full. So we're going to say it does not equal 0. That means it's got the piece in there already, and we need to check the cell above. So we just need to do R equals R minus 1 to check the cell above it. And once it finds an empty cell, it will jump out of this while loop, and so we need to put a piece in that empty cell at position R. So we're going to use the same named formula and item R, and we're going to set it to, we'll just set it to 1 for now. Let me show you that in action. I select my column, and it places a piece in the 6th row. If the 6th row is taken, it will place it in the 5th row. If I try and play in the same column multiple times, it won't actually do anything, and that's because the selection isn't changing, and therefore this code is not running. And the reason it's not changing is because we already have that cell selected. So to get around this, I'm just going to change which cell is selected. So here, I'm going to add range A1 dot select. And what that will do is every time a cell is selected or there is a selection change, it will, at the end of running this code, select A1. So I can click anywhere on the spreadsheet and it will jump back to A1, which is kind of useful anyway because it stops people editing the rest of the spreadsheet. But if I click on a column, it will play a piece and then it jumps back to A1, allowing me to select that column again. Once the column is full, then this changes to X, indicating that we can't play there anymore. However, the code isn't stopping us doing that at the moment. What will currently happen is it will check all of these cells, think they're all taken, and therefore this is the next empty space, and it will play a piece there, which is incorrect. So what we need to do is put in an extra condition here to stop it from doing that, and what I'm going to say is if the target does not equal X, and then only will we place a piece. So just to reiterate, this if statement is now saying if we've chosen a cell in this range and it is not an X, then only then will we play a piece. So let me demonstrate that for you now. I'll remove that one and I will play a piece, or attempt to play a piece, and you can see nothing's happening and it's just simply jumping away. But I can still play in the columns with the arrows. Currently we're only playing yellow pieces, and we want to alternate that between yellow and red. So we need this number to change from 1 and 2, depending on whose go it is. And the way I've done that is using formulas. So let me go back to the original game. In sheet 2, I've got these formulas here to tell me who was the last person to play and who is the next person to play. So I'm going to recreate those in our game on the same sheet so that we can actually see it in action whilst we're playing the game. And I'll explain to you what those formulas are doing. I've put my spreadsheet into design mode for the time being, and all that does is it stops any code running automatically. So the way I'm going to figure out whose go it is to play next is by counting how many pieces have already been played. So I will do a count if. I will look at our board and I want it to count how many cells do not equal 0. And that's going to give us the count of the pieces played, which is 10. 6 here, 3 here, and 1 here. If I put another piece in there, the count goes up. Now to convert this into whose turn it is, I'm going to put it around inside a mod formula. And what this does, it takes one number, divides it by another, in this case we're going to use 2, and tells us the remainder. So it's given us 1. If I put in another piece, it gives us 0. But of course our players are 1 and 2, so I'm simply going to add 1 to this formula, and that way we are going to switch between player 1 and player 2. I'm also going to create a formula to tell me who was the last player to play, and that will become clear exactly why later on. But it's pretty much the same formula, except we're going to -1 off the piece count. So we're just imagining there's one less piece on the board. I'm going to name these two ranges. This one is last play. This one is next play. And I can now use next play to tell me which piece to place in the column. So instead of just placing 1, we are going to place whatever the value is in next play. So let me show you that in action. I'll take it out of design mode. If I select a column, it's red and then yellow. Red, yellow, red, yellow. The board is getting pretty full now, and so I've added this button, New Game. And by button I mean I've just put the words New Game into that cell. And I'm going to add some code so that we have another check that when we change our selection, if it equals New Game, it will simply clear the board ready for a new game. So that code belongs in here, and it will be else if target equals new game, then, and all we're going to do is say range board equals 0. And when I click new game, all of the cells are set to 0 and we're ready to start again. Now we essentially have a working game. I can place pieces, and we can keep taking in turns, and then 4 in a row, yellow wins. But I'm going to make the game itself, the spreadsheet, actually tell us when a player wins and to stop players being able to play pieces, because currently they could continue to put pieces in the board. So I'm going to use those named ranges that we set up before. The diagonal ones, horizontal ones, and vertical ones. I'm going to make a set of formulas to check if there are any 4s in a row and tell us if there is a win. So first I'm going to do the set of formulas for the horizontal ranges. I'm going to do a count if, and we're going to look at each of the horizontal ranges starting with horizontal 1, and we're going to count if it equals the value of the last played. And this has given us 4 because player 1 played last, so we're checking for player 1 wins, and we have 4 in this range, which is horizontal 1. But we wanted to say true or false, so I'm just going to put here equals 4, and then it says true. I'm going to repeat this for each of the ranges with the horizontal checks. So horizontal 2 all the way up to horizontal 24. The vertical checks are identical to the horizontal checks, but instead of the horizontal ranges, we're looking at vert1 to vert21. This one says true because you can see here that the range vert4 has 4 1s in it, and therefore it is a player 1 win vertically. The diagonal checks are a bit trickier because if you remember, our diagonal ranges are a grid, and that's because when they are disconnected like this, we can't rely on the COUNTIF formula anymore. So instead, we're going to use a different formula to check these diagonals. So in this grid, we can think of it as coordinates, and so we can say item 1, 1, so row 1, column 1, and then item row 2, column 2, 3, 3, and 4, 4. So we need to check those 4. And then in the opposite direction, we would need 1, 4, we would need 2, 3, 3, 2, and finally 4, 1. creating this in a formula, I will use an AND function, and in here I'm going to put in each of my checks for each of those coordinates. Index allows us to do that, and I enter in my range, and then the row number 1 and my column number 1. So that's looking at this column here, cell, and we want to say, does that equal the last person who played? But we need to check that all 4 of these equal the last played. So I'll repeat that index function for each of the pairs of coordinates. That's 2, 2. That's 3, 3. And finally, we will do 4, 4. And that's going to check this diagonal here. I also want to check this diagonal in the opposite direction. So it's almost exactly the same, so I'm going to copy the formula across, except we want to go from this corner to this corner. So we're going to go 1, 4, 2, 3, 3, 2, and finally 4, 1. And you can see that one equals true because there are four yellows in a row. And I'll repeat that for each of the diagonal grids. Finally, I want a formula that will just tell me if any of these are true. And so I just do equals or, and I can select that whole range. And it says true because there is a true in there. If I reset the board, then everything is set back to false. So what I want to do is make it such that once the player has won, they can't carry on playing, and the winning player is announced. So again, I'm going to pop into design mode. I'm going to name this range 1 and take it back out of design mode. And if I go to my VBA editor, what I'm going to do is after a piece is played, I'm going to say if range 1, then message box range last play ampersand wins. So then it'll tell us who's won, and up here I'm going to add another condition. I'm going to say range 1. Sorry, I'm actually going to say not range 1. So range 1 will tell us true or false, and if it's true it means that the player has won, so we do not want them to be able to place a piece. So we're going to say not range 1. So basically there is not a winner yet, so we can carry on placing pieces. And that should mean our game is 100% working for a 2-player game. So let's see it in action. New game, clears the board, all of this is set to false. The next to play is player 1. Player 1 plays, it's yellow. Player 2 plays, it's red. We keep going like so until we find a winner. And when they win, it says 1 wins. If I try and play again, I can't, so I have to start a new game. And that's that. That is basically all you need to do to create a Connect 4 game. Now, this isn't actually the full extent of the game I made before and showed at the beginning. I have given the original version the ability to play against an AI. So let me show you how that works. I select my setting, whether I want it to be AI plays first or second. I press new game, and the AI plays in a random place. It's not a clever AI, it just plays anywhere. And I win. So if you want to actually see how this works, I'm more than happy to send you a copy of the spreadsheet, and then if you want to challenge, you can try and build your own AI that is much more sophisticated than just placing randomly. Like I say, if you want a copy of this, please drop me an email. The email is in the description, and I hope you have found this useful. It does demonstrate a lot of different ideas and tools you can use with VBA combined with Excel functionality to achieve quite a lot. And I know normally you're not creating a game, but hopefully you'll learn some techniques through doing this that you can apply to real life situations as well. Thanks for watching.